Hi guys, and welcome to the Bold, Beautiful Borderline podcast. It's your host, Sarah, and today we're going to talk about people pleasing. But before we do that, I just want to take a second and say, wow, it is Sunday, November 10th today, and there's so many things that I could say. Tuesday, November 5th, I stayed up very, very late, and probably everyone listening to this podcast knows that I did not vote for President-elect Trump. I did vote for Harris Walz, and I was feeling pretty hopeful. I especially like Walz. I was raised by a public school educator. I believe in the public school system, and I believe that he is a person who really lives his values, which I don't see very often from people who have the identities that he has. Not to attack white men. That's just my experience as a queer woman in conversations with cis het white men. So I was feeling very hopeful about him, and I was feeling very hopeful about Harris. She wouldn't be my first choice as a president, nor would Walz, but they're who, we had. And obviously, I would love to have the first female president. I would love to have the first female Black president. I would love to see a lot of things be different in this country, and they're not right now. So I believe the answer is that we must be different. I really believe in community care. I really believe in going outside and looking at my neighbors and looking at the people in the grocery store and smiling and trying to find the common ground. I look at people who don't look like me. I live in a very poor, rural, conservative area, and I try to look at older men who are not wearing camouflage, ironically, the same way I am, and try to find the common ground. I've been angry and I'll still be angry. I want to believe that not everyone who voted for Trump wants to hurt me. Not everyone who voted for Trump wants to hurt the people that I love. And maybe not a lot of people will agree with this perspective, but this is the perspective I have to take in order to keep staying alive and to keep doing what I do. I woke up Tuesday, November 5th, and I put on my fucking game face, man. As a therapist, it's like going to war, a war of compassion. It's showing up for people. It's holding space for people who are terrified and devastated. And at the end of the day, I just fucking lost it. As a therapist, I feel really tired. As a person with a mental illness, many mental illnesses, I feel very tired. And I know that everybody listening feels tired. I'm going to be hoping to talk to people who can share their perspective on how they are navigating this emotionally, physically, spiritually, in terms of how you're preparing for the future. I've had friends say that they're trying to kind of get a backstock of medication going, whatever it is that you're doing to try to prepare for the unknown. I support you, and I am here. And we are here as a community of people with borderline. So, stand with your friends, guys. Stand with the people you love. Stand with people you don't love. And let's see what the future has in store for us. Okay, let's talk about people pleasing. So people may not think of me as a people pleaser because I'm very much like, fuck you and fuck your mom too. But I am absolutely a people pleaser, and to my core, it is painful to fight the people pleasing. And this is coming up because something occurred this summer with my family, and I was very clear that my feelings were hurt. And I think I articulated myself very well. I wasn't mean. I was very honest about the way I was experiencing this thing, and my father has not spoken to me since July. It's now November 10th. I would have historically done anything to try to get him to talk to me. but that would have hurt me. People pleasing is defined as a behavior pattern characterized by prioritizing the needs, desires, and approval over one's own. So I could, do something to kind of fold my cards, essentially, and make my father feel good about the relationship and where it's at. And I could ignore the fact that I'm very hurt that he has not spoken to me in 4 months, when I don't believe that what I did deserved that. In fact, I know that it didn't. If I were to do that, that would essentially tell him it's okay that you are ignoring your daughter. In the long run, that doesn't benefit me. I'm working really hard to not prioritize the needs of other people over my own, because I'm worthy of people showing up and being in conversation with me. I'm worthy of people expressing how they feel to me and trusting that I can meet them in that. I have worked very hard to have the skills to be able to have hard conversations with people. I've worked very hard for someone to say to me, my feelings are hurt, and me to say, I'm sorry. But people pleasing would be ignoring that. People pleasing would be, okay, I'm going to run and do that errand even though I don't have the time or the money or the emotional capacity or whatever. Because if I do that for you, then you will love me. So people talk about people pleasing as a kind of way of just like accommodating other people because of this strong desire to be liked or accepted. And it is that. But it's also very much a trauma response to, if I do this thing for you, then I can soothe my own anxiety about being unsafe, emotionally unsafe. Like, it doesn't feel very good that we're going into the holiday season and my father hasn't spoken to me. And I know my father loves me. And I hope that my father knows that I love him. And it would soothe my anxiety so much more to pretend that everything is okay and to, go and do whatever we do in the holidays. Like, that would make me feel better, because I have a severe fear of the future right now. What will come of this period of time? I don't know. I don't know if there will be a big fight at the end of this. I don't know if he will listen to this podcast and be angry that I'm speaking my truth. Even though I haven't done or said anything that, indicates he's a bad person. He isn't a bad person. He's clearly creating a space that he feels like he needs. But people pleasing hurts us. And my therapist told me something, so cliche the other day, but it's, Sarah, stop making yourself small so that other people can be big. Stop saying it's okay that you ignored the fact that I needed you to ask me first if that worked for me. Stop wearing the clothes that your partner wants you to wear because they don't want anyone to see your body. Right? That is people pleasing. Because other people are feeling insecure, or other people don't trust, or other people don't want to navigate their own things, or other people don't want to go to therapy. So you go to therapy and you learn the skills and you learn the tools without expecting that they will go. Y'all, that's people pleasing. And I know, as people with borderline, we do this. People think we fight. And sometimes we do. But often they're not seeing the ways in which we ignore our own needs to meet the needs of others, because that's how we feel safe. That's how we feel loved. And if we are safe and we are loved, then the trauma that we, lived through in our childhood that resulted in these strong emotion dysregulation concerns, we won't relive that. So people pleasing, it's so much more than just saying yes and I'm sorry. All behavior is caused. I will say that until I am, blue in the face. All behavior is caused. Every time I say I'm sorry out of the blue, what I'm really saying is I'm scared. I'm sorry. I'm scared. I'm sorry. I'm scared. What I really need to start saying is, I'm scared. So I want to talk about some of the ways in which people pleasing really hurts us. And then I will have another episode about how to stop people pleasing, which really speaks to a lot of boundary setting. And in fact, there's 6 different types of boundaries that I didn't know until I became a therapist. So let me just pass that along. But how does people pleasing hurt us? So the first way is it literally erodes away our self-esteem. When we constantly prioritize the needs of others over our own, we start to believe that we aren't allowed to have our own needs. Our own needs aren't there. We don't even think of them. We don't even see that we're tired or that we're scared or whatever. It becomes about the other person. So there's a lot of codependency in self-esteem, right? But self-esteem really should be built on just who we are, just what our skills are, just the things we love, and not how other people love us or appreciate us. We neglect our personal needs, right? Constantly saying yes leaves no time for our own getting our goals met and prioritizing what we're interested in. I think that this is something that I did when I bought my van. I really wish that I would have traveled more in it. But I wanted to be with people who made me feel loved. And so I didn't go out in it as much as I wanted to. That was me neglecting a personal need. And not necessarily because the other person's needs were more important than mine, but because I was so, obsessed with them, really. I mean, I was just so obsessed with them and loving them and wanting to be with them and be there with them and for them and all of these things that I kind of lost my own dreams. And I think people pleasing, when it occurs in a relationship, whether the other person needs us to or not, or if it's just ingrained to us the same way it was ingrained in me to do that, it's easy to lose ourselves. Boundary setting becomes a nightmare when we people please. I think I started this podcast in 2020, so everyone has heard my mother and I go on quite the journey. And Sherry came on the podcast a couple of years ago, which was such a beautiful episode. Lori really facilitated a great conversation for Sherry and I. So if you guys can find yourself scrolling back and you're interested, good luck. Her and I are not the same versions of ourselves now as mother-daughter that we were then, but my mom and I really didn't have boundaries. We spoke every single morning on the phone and every evening on the phone. And it used to be a goal of mine to call her, before she called me. Every morning on my way to work, when I worked for the state, I would smoke 2 cigarettes and speak to my mom the entire drive. I didn't realize that wasn't normal because that was what I witnessed growing up between my mother and my grandmother. But eventually, that impacted my relationships because if people were in the car with me or whatever, they wanted to be in the car with me, but I wanted to be in the car with my mom. Again, I don't know when that became a thing. I do know that my mom has been very open about I have been, up until the last year or so, her sole emotional kind of relationship in terms of who supports her emotionally. And I'm glad that I've pulled back on that because I think that then allows her and my dad to develop more of that relationship. But I do think that the boundary setting has been very hard for us because I have felt a profound desire to please and take care of her. And I think that in her own way, she's felt that with me. She wants to avoid me having any discomfort, so she stays quiet. She doesn't speak, her truth or talk much about her experience as the mother of someone who's so persistently mentally ill because she doesn't want to hurt me or our relationship. That's a very messy dynamic. Very messy dynamic. And I wish I understood her perspective. Perhaps someday we'll be able to peel away those layers, but it's unique that I think that we both have had this people-pleasing desire towards one another. It makes it hard to have like an authentic kind of relationship, which is in fact the next thing that I wrote down is when we are constantly people-pleasing, then we are not our authentic selves. Because if we are our authentic selves, then, maybe there's going to be conflict. And so if we just project this person who's a yes ma'am, yes man, yes they, them, then we're often hiding our authentic selves. And not being authentic can actually make us feel like we don't have a relationship with the people that we are people pleasing towards. So that's like, a unique thing. And in this sense, you can see how trauma it fucking puts its webs in us, right? And it makes it so that we can't be real and relationships can't be real. Real's maybe a bad word, but it's hard. It's hard to find the authenticity in relationships when we're constantly trying to build up the other person or other place or other thing because we're afraid of standing on our own. Or we're afraid of saying, no, I need to be built up too. Of course, increased anxiety and distress and depression and, dissociation or whatever comes from this too. Strained relationships, like I spoke about, with my mother, people pleasing can absolutely weaken relationships. People avoid speaking honestly about their needs. And the relationship can often kind of feel superficial or feel like there's a power dynamic that is not equal. And, there's always going to be a kind of power dynamic that's not equal when you're looking at a parent-child relationship. And then even the child-parent relationship as the parent is aging and may need care or whatever. I think that's especially a time where it's hard that you want to people please. You want to take care of a parent as they get older. I know for me, I would absolutely engage in kind of taking care of or people pleasing behavior as a way of just keeping the relationship stable and close towards the end of someone's life. I could see myself doing that. Or I could see myself completely avoiding it altogether. I think I kind of jump back and forth between that, like, I'm all in or I'm all out thing, which I would love to find more of the gray, more of the boundary in the middle. But that's a hard thing for me. Okay, so before we end, I wanted to find some statistics about people pleasing because, the word is funny and cute and it's kind of like very pop psychology, but this is real. There is well-researched, peer-reviewed studies around the impact of people pleasing. They're not as easy to find as some other, just basic research about BPD, for example, but there is research around people pleasing. So Dr. Marianne LaFranc, who knows, explored gender and people pleasing, and her study found that people pleasing is more prevalent in women than men. Of course, there's a, power difference there. And often, women are socialized through their relationships and their childhood to be more empathetic and more cooperative. And that leads to people-pleasing behavior and social pressure to please others to kind of like maintain harmony and suppress our own needs. So that is literal research. And then there's data from 2021 that was published in Frontiers, which is a psychology database that found that individuals who reported feeling the need to meet others' expectations at work experienced much higher levels of stress and burnout. So people-pleasing equals burnout, y'all. And we're going into the holidays. We're going into a heavy time in the next few years. All of this is to say, take care of yourself. take care of yourself, not just so that you can take better care of others, blah, blah, blah. Take care of yourself because you need it and because you deserve it. Another research study found that people-pleasing is often tied to social anxiety, with around 90% of individuals with high social anxiety reported behaviors such as excessive approval seeking or avoiding saying no to others. Yeah, I have both my hands up. I mean, just profound social anxiety, which is social phobia, which is social paranoia. I don't know. It's definitely on the cusp of neuroses and psychoses anyway. I have a ton of struggles saying no, even about silly things. It gives me fear to know that other people might not have their needs met, because then for me, it's the unknown of, am I unsafe? Are things going to get thrown across the room? Am I going to come home to my bed flipped and my stuff broken? Am I going to get yelled at? I don't know. My body and my brain doesn't know in that moment. And so I just go into, I'll do whatever I can to make this moment better, and let's just move forward, right? The two are definitely related. People-pleasing, social anxiety. So when we stop people-pleasing, we actually are like directly and indirectly working at reducing our social anxiety, which I like the, two birds, one stone there. Okay, another statistic, a study by Dr. Davila, again, I don't know, found that people who suppress their own needs to accommodate their partner are at a higher risk for resentment and dissatisfaction, ultimately impacting their relationship stability, which I'm not like a big Gottman person, but it is said that resentment is the number one indicator of relationships ending. So that statistic kind of speaks for itself. Okay, and then I thought we would end on a goodie, the most relatable for those of us with BPD. Studies on attachment and trauma suggest that people who experience rejection, criticism, or abandonment in childhood may be more likely to develop people-pleasing tendencies in adulthood. Approximately 30 to 40% of adults with anxious attachment patterns report these behaviors in relationships. I speak about attachment a lot, but I don't know that we've ever done like an attachment series on the podcast. So maybe I need to do that. Attachment, a very fast overview. Attachment, we're born these squiggly, cute little creatures who can't take care of ourselves. The ways in which our primary caregiver, generally mom, takes care of us influences our attachment style. Secure being the one we want, secure being the one the vast majority of Americans are not. Anxious attachment means we'll do anything to try to keep the person close. Avoidant attachment means we run for the fucking hills because love is scary. That's me. Disorganized attachment is kind of a combination of the above. I digress. It is not surprising to me that people with anxious attachment are more likely to engage in people-pleasing. And I grew up with a lot of anxious attachment, and that's really transitioned into avoidant attachment. And attachment really depends on the person. But when I think about my people-pleasing towards my mother, for example, that's very anxious attachment based. Okay, y'all, those are the statistics. That is why people-pleasing hurts us. There's going to be another episode about how we say fuck that to people-pleasing. So wait for that. Thanks for listening to the podcast, and I love you. Thank you for tuning in to the Bold, Beautiful Borderline podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your content. That's super helpful for me in finding additional folks who want to listen to the show, want to feel seen, family members, partners who want to understand. You can also follow along at Bold, Beautiful Borderline or at Borderline from Hell on Instagram. For the blog and a more extensive list of resources, go to boldbeautifulborderline.com. There you can also request to be a guest on the show, or you can do my favorite thing and leave a voicemail to be played at one of our future episodes. All of this information can be seen below in the show notes. If you'd like to support the show and get exclusive perks, consider becoming a Patreon member. Your support helps me with creating content to destigmatize BPD and all the other wild mental health struggles that I discuss on this podcast. As always, thank you so much for guests and listeners alike. I love you. Until next time, keep living and seeking joy. Information in this podcast is not medical advice, but rather experience from individuals living with mental illnesses. If you want to try a treatment that you heard about, please consult your treatment team. The music in this podcast was created by a longtime friend of mine, Corey Evans from the Evergreen Band. You can find him on Instagram at @the_Evergreen Band. Cover art was created by my husband, Talon Abbott. Their information is in the show notes. There is no producer for this show. It's all me.